My name is Patricia Vaughn. I'm 68 years old. 3 months ago, I stood outside my own beach house, the one my husband and I bought 40 years ago, the one where we raised our son, celebrated anniversaries, and scattered his ashes in the garden, and I couldn't get in. My daughter-in-law had changed all the locks. Her parents were living inside, and when I called her, she laughed. "It's squatters' rights, Patricia. Look it up. We've been here over 30 days. You can't just kick us out." She was right about one thing. I couldn't just kick them out. But I never said I would. Before I tell you what happened, how the siren started at 6 in the morning, how the fire marshal gave them exactly 5 minutes to grab their belongings, how my daughter-in-law ran out in her pajamas crying while the whole neighborhood watched, I want to ask you something. If you enjoy this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing this community spans the whole world. Now let me take you back to the beginning. 3 years ago, I buried my husband Robert after 41 years of marriage. Cancer took him slowly, the way it does, stealing pieces of him until there was nothing left but memories and an empty chair at the dinner table. We met when I was 23, a brand new elementary school teacher with chalk dust on my sleeves and big dreams about shaping young minds. Robert was an accountant who couldn't balance his own checkbook, but somehow made me laugh every single day. We built a life together in Raleigh, North Carolina. We raised our son Derek, and every summer, every Christmas, every anniversary that mattered, we spent at our beach house in the Outer Banks. Robert called it his dream house. I called it our sanctuary. After he passed, I kept living in our Raleigh home. The beach house sat waiting, 3 hours away, holding 40 years of memories in its walls. I visited when I could, checking on things, pulling weeds from the garden Robert planted, sitting on the porch watching sunsets the way we used to do together. People told me I should sell it. Too much house for one woman, they said. Too far to drive alone. But they didn't understand. That house wasn't real estate. It was Robert. My days settled into a quiet rhythm. Gardening in the mornings, books in the afternoons. Every December, I'd get Christmas cards from former students, children I'd taught decades ago, now grown with families of their own. One card always made me smile. Marcus Smith, a shy boy from my 4th grade class back in 1993, now working somewhere in fire safety. He never forgot to sign it, "Your grateful student." I kept every card. Robert always said I was too sentimental. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's why I never saw what was coming. Derek married Megan 5 years ago. I remember the wedding. How beautiful she looked. How happy my son seemed. How I cried tears I thought were joy. Megan Porter came from a modest background. Her father Gary was a retired plumber. Her mother Linda had worked retail most of her life. There's no shame in that. Robert and I weren't wealthy people either. We worked hard, saved carefully, and built what we had one brick at a time. But something about Megan always felt calculated. She was sweet to my face, too sweet sometimes. She'd call me sweetie in a voice that made me feel like a child being managed. She'd pat my hand when I talked about Robert, saying, "That's nice, Patricia," before changing the subject. She never invited me to their dinner parties, claiming I wouldn't enjoy the crowd. When I visited their apartment, she'd watch me like I might steal the silverware. Little things, easy to dismiss, easy to tell yourself you're imagining it. Derek never seemed to notice, or maybe he chose not to. My son had always been gentle. Too gentle, Robert used to say. The kind of man who avoided conflict like it was a disease. When Megan spoke, Derek listened. When Megan decided, Derek agreed. I told myself it was love. I told myself he was happy. One evening last spring, Megan mentioned the beach house during a family dinner. "It's such a waste," she said, not looking at me. "Sitting empty most of the year. You're not getting any younger, Patricia. Driving 3 hours alone at your age? It's not safe." "I manage just fine," I said. She smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm just saying. If you ever want to sell it or let family use it more often." I changed the subject. Later, I mentioned the conversation to Harold Webb, Robert's old friend and our family lawyer. He'd helped us with the house paperwork years ago. "Keep your documents safe, Patty," Harold said, "and don't sign anything without calling me first." I thought he was being overcautious. I was wrong. The last peaceful visit happened in early September. I drove down on a Thursday morning, windows open, radio playing oldies from the station Robert and I used to love. The Outer Banks in September is something special. Summer crowds gone, beaches quiet, the light turning golden as autumn approaches. The house looked exactly as I'd left it. 2 stories of weathered cedar shingles, a wraparound porch facing the ocean, and the garden Robert spent 20 years perfecting. His roses were still blooming. I like to think he was tending them from somewhere. My neighbor Eleanor Whitfield waved from her porch next door. She was 72, a widow like me, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. We'd been friends for 15 years. "Patty, I was hoping you'd come down before the weather turns." We sat on her porch, drinking sweet tea, talking about nothing important, her grandchildren, my garden, the new family that moved in 3 houses down. "Got myself one of those Ring cameras," Eleanor said, pointing to a small device by her door. "My son installed it last month. Shows me everything happening on the street, even when I'm inside. Caught the mailman leaving packages in the rain last week." "Technology," I said, shaking my head. "I can barely work my flip phone." Eleanor laughed. "You and me both, but this thing saves everything to the cloud, whatever that means. My son says nobody can delete it." I didn't think much of it then, just an old woman's new toy. When I left Sunday afternoon, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked at the end of the street. Dark sedan, out-of-state plates. Probably a tourist, I thought. I didn't look back. I should have. 2 weeks later, something felt wrong. I called Derek on a Tuesday evening just to check in. Megan answered his phone. "He's busy," she said. No hello, no warmth. "I'll tell him you called." "Is everything all right?" "Fine. Everything's fine." A pause. "Hey, Patricia, you're not planning any trips to the beach house soon, are you?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't planned on it. Why? "Oh, no reason." Her voice lightened, almost relieved. "Just thinking you should rest. You've been doing so much driving lately. At your age, it's important to take it easy." "At your age." She said it like a diagnosis. "I'm 68, Megan, not 90. Of course. I just worry about you, that's all. Anyway, I'll have Derek call you back." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in Robert's chair for a long time that night, replaying the conversation. Something was off. Megan never worried about me. Megan barely acknowledged me. 3 days later, Eleanor called. "Patty?" Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "I need to ask you something. Did you rent out your house?" My stomach dropped. "No. Why would you ask that?" "Because there are people living in it. I've seen cars coming and going all week. Furniture being moved in yesterday. I assumed you'd told them they could stay, but... Eleanor, I haven't given anyone permission to stay there." Silence on the line. "Patty," she said slowly, "I think you need to come down here. Soon." I was in my car within the hour. The 3-hour drive felt like 10. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My mind raced through possibilities. A break-in, squatters, some terrible misunderstanding. I called Derek twice. No answer. I called Megan, straight to voicemail. When I finally turned onto my street, my heart stopped. There were 2 cars in my driveway, cars I didn't recognize. The curtains in the front window, my curtains, the ones I'd picked out with Robert, had been replaced with something dark and heavy. And the flower pots on the porch, the ones Robert had painted himself, were gone. I parked on the street and walked to my own front door on legs that felt like water. I tried my key. It didn't fit. I tried the garage code. Invalid. I knocked. Pounded, really. The door opened, and I found myself staring at Gary Porter, Megan's father. He was wearing a bathrobe, my husband's bathrobe, the one I'd kept hanging in the closet because it still smelled like him. "Mrs. Vaughn?" He didn't seem surprised. "Megan said you might stop by." "What are you doing in my house?" Before he could answer, Linda Porter appeared behind him, coffee cup in hand. Then Megan walked out from the kitchen, my kitchen, looking at me like I was an inconvenient salesman. "Patricia!" She smiled. "You really should call before you visit. This is my house." My voice came out strangled. "What is happening?" Megan's smile didn't waver. Mom and Dad needed a place to stay. Their apartment had issues, and this place was just sitting empty, so you moved them in? Without asking me? We've been here over 30 days now. Megan's tone shifted, harder now. Do you know what that means, Patricia? Squatters' rights. Look it up. You can't just throw us out. You'd have to go to court, hire lawyers, wait months. She laughed. Face it, you're not getting this house back anytime soon. I looked past her, into the living room. They'd moved the furniture. Robert's reading chair was gone. Derek, I could barely speak. Where is my son? Megan stepped aside. And there he was, my boy, standing in the hallway, looking at the floor. Derek, I whispered, tell me you didn't know about this. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. I drove home in a fog. The highway blurred through tears I couldn't stop. 40 years of memories, stolen. My husband's sanctuary, invaded. And my son, my only child, standing there like a stranger, choosing silence over his own mother. When I got back to Raleigh, I tried calling Derek again. This time, Megan answered. He doesn't want to talk to you, Patricia. You upset him. I upset him? You stole my house. We didn't steal anything. We're using a property that was sitting empty. There's a difference. Her voice dripped with condescension. Look, I know this is hard for someone your age to understand, but the law is on our side. Maybe it's time you accepted that. She hung up. I sat in the dark for hours, the phone clutched in my hand. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My daughter-in-law moved her parents into my vacation home? It sounded absurd even to me. The next morning, I called the Dare County Sheriff's Office anyway. Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter, the deputy said, not unkindly. If they've been there over 30 days and won't leave, you'll need to go through the eviction process. How long does that take? Could be 3 months. Could be 6. Depends on the courts. I called a lawyer, just someone from the phone book, not Harold. I was too embarrassed to tell Harold what had happened. Eviction in North Carolina isn't quick, the lawyer confirmed. And if they fight it, which it sounds like they will, you're looking at significant time and expense. We're talking thousands of dollars, Mrs. Vaughn. And at the end of it, you might still have property damage to deal with. That night, I sat in Robert's chair and stared at his photograph on the mantel. What do I do? I asked him. They took everything, and our son let them. The house was silent. I had never felt more alone in my life. Eleanor called 2 days later. Patty, I've been thinking about what happened, and I remembered something. Her voice was careful, deliberate. My Ring camera. It faces the street, but it catches part of your driveway too. I went back through the footage. My heart began to pound. What did you find? You need to see this in person. Can you come down? I was in my car before she finished the sentence. Eleanor met me at her door with a tablet in her hands, a device her son had set up to review the camera footage. She led me to her kitchen table, poured us both coffee, and pressed play. The video was dated 5 weeks earlier, September 8th, 2:47 p.m. On the screen, a pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Gary Porter got out of the passenger side. Megan got out of the driver's side. They walked to my front door, looked around, and then Megan pulled something from her purse. A crowbar. I watched my daughter-in-law pry open my front door. I watched her father help her force it open. I watched them walk into my house like they owned it. They broke in, I whispered. They didn't have a key. They broke in. There's more, Eleanor scrolled forward. Derek showed up about an hour later. By then the door was fixed. They must have replaced the lock. He walked right in like nothing happened. He knew. The words tasted like ash. He knew what they did, and he helped cover it up. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Patty, this isn't squatters' rights. This is breaking and entering. This is criminal. The police will need this video, and I've already backed it up to the cloud. Eleanor smiled grimly. Nobody's deleting this. Not Megan. Not anyone. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. I felt the beginning of a plan. I called Harold Webb that afternoon. He'd been Robert's friend for over 30 years. They'd played golf together, shared whiskey on holidays, argued about politics like old men do. After Robert passed, Harold had handled the estate, made sure everything was in order. He'd told me to call any time. I'd been too proud to call, too embarrassed, but pride wasn't going to get my house back. "Patty." Harold's voice was warm but concerned. "I've been trying to reach you. Derek called me last week, asking questions about the beach house deed. I didn't like the sound of it." "Derek called you?" "Wanted to know if his name was on the property. I told him no. The house is yours, free and clear, always has been. Robert put it in your name alone back in 1985. Harold paused. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The break-in, the squatter's rights claim, Derek's silence, Megan's laughter. When I finished, Harold was quiet for a long moment. "Patty, I need you to come to my office. Bring that video your neighbor has, and bring your copy of the deed. It should be in your safe deposit box." "What are you thinking, Harold?" "I'm thinking Megan doesn't know the law as well as she thinks she does. Squatter's rights, adverse possession, doesn't work the way she described. There are requirements, time requirements, permission requirements, and most importantly," he paused, "it doesn't apply to people who broke into the property illegally." "So I can get them out?" "Eventually, yes. The traditional eviction route would take months, but—" Harold's voice took on a different tone. "I might know a faster way, a legal way. It's unconventional, but it could work." "What is it?" "Do you remember Marcus Smith, the boy you taught in 4th grade? He sends you Christmas cards every year." "Marcus? What does he have to do with this?" "He's the fire marshal for Dare County now, Patty, and I think he might be very interested in helping his favorite teacher." Before I could meet with Harold and Marcus, Megan struck first. The Zoom invitation arrived on a Wednesday evening. "Family meeting," the subject line read. "Important discussion about Mom Vaughn's situation." Mom Vaughn. Like I was a problem to be managed, I almost didn't join. But something told me I needed to see what Megan was planning. When the call connected, I found myself looking at a grid of faces. Derek's aunts, his cousins, people I'd known for decades. Megan sat in the center of her screen, perfectly lit, perfectly composed. Derek was beside her, looking uncomfortable. "Thank you all for joining," Megan began, her voice dripping with false concern. "I wanted to talk about something difficult. As some of you know, Patricia has been struggling lately." I unmuted myself. "Struggling?" Megan smiled sadly. "She's been making some confusing accusations, claiming we stole her beach house. My parents are staying there temporarily, with Derek's permission, of course, and Patricia has been very upset about it." "That house is mine," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You broke in. I have video—" "See what I mean?" Megan shook her head. "She's talking about video evidence that doesn't exist. It's very concerning. At her age, confusion like this—" The implication hung in the air. She was suggesting I was senile. "Patricia," Derek's Aunt Carol said gently, "maybe you're remembering things wrong. Megan says they had a key." "They didn't have a key. They used a crowbar." "A crowbar?" Megan laughed. "Patricia, listen to yourself." One by one, I watched my relatives nod along with Megan's narrative. Poor, confused Patricia, making up stories, causing trouble for no reason. Derek said nothing, not one word in my defense. The call ended with vague promises to check in on me, code for monitoring the crazy old woman. Afterward, my phone buzzed. A text from Megan. "You lost, Patricia. Everyone sees it now. You're just a confused old woman who doesn't understand how the world works. Give up. Enjoy your retirement. And stay away from my house." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot. She thought I was too old to fight back. She thought I didn't understand technology. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Harold's office smelled like old books and leather, the same way it had smelled when Robert was alive. Some things don't change. What changed was the man sitting across from Harold's desk. Marcus Smith stood when I entered. He was 42 now, tall and broad-shouldered in his Fire Marshal uniform, but I still saw the shy 9-year-old who used to sit in the front row of my classroom, trying not to cry because his father had just walked out on the family. "Mrs. Vaughn," his voice cracked slightly, "I can't believe it's really you." "Marcus," I took his hands in mine. "Look at you. A fire marshal." Because of you." He said it simply, like a fact. "You're the one who told me I could be anything. You stayed after school to help me with reading when everyone else gave up. I never forgot that." Harold cleared his throat. "I've filled Marcus in on the situation, Patty. He's seen the video." Marcus's expression hardened. "What they did to you is criminal, breaking and entering at minimum. But I know the court system in Dare County. Eviction cases get backlogged for months. By the time you get a hearing, they could do real damage to the property." "So, what do I do?" Marcus and Harold exchanged a look. "Mrs. Vaughn," Marcus said slowly, "are you familiar with how fire departments train?" No, not really. We use donated structures, abandoned buildings, condemned properties, places owners want demolished anyway. We practice rescue operations, smoke control, evacuation procedures." He paused. "If a property owner donates their building to the fire department for training purposes, we take immediate possession. Anyone inside has to leave. Not in 3 months. Not after a court hearing. Immediately." I stared at him. "You're saying I could donate my house to the fire department?" Marcus smiled. "I'm saying we should talk about your options." Harold spread documents across his desk as Marcus explained. "Here's how it works," Marcus said. "Property owners sometimes donate structures to fire departments for training exercises. It's completely legal. Happens all the time. Usually it's buildings slated for demolition, but there's no requirement that the building be destroyed." "I don't understand," I said. "If I donate the house, don't I lose it?" "Not necessarily," Harold jumped in. "The donation can be structured as a temporary transfer for training purposes. After the exercises are complete, the property can be returned to the original owner or sold back at a nominal price." "Nominal meaning?" $1. Harold smiled. "I've already researched the precedents. It's unusual, but it's legal. The key point is this. Once the fire department takes possession, anyone occupying the property must vacate immediately. This isn't an eviction. It's a public safety matter." Marcus nodded. "And as Fire Marshal, I have the authority to clear any structure we've acquired for training. No court order needed. No waiting period. If there are occupants, they get a reasonable time to collect personal belongings and leave. That's it." "How much time is reasonable?" 5 minutes for a small structure. Maybe 10 for a larger one. Marcus's eyes met mine. "Your beach house isn't that big, Mrs. Vaughn." I sat back, trying to process what they were telling me. "So I sign over the house, you show up and tell them to leave, and then I buy it back for $1? "Essentially, yes. The paperwork takes about a week to process. After that, we can schedule the training exercise whenever you want." "What about the break-in? The criminal charges?" "That's separate," Harold said. "We'll file a police report with the video evidence. Megan and her parents will face charges regardless of what happens with the house. But this way, you get your property back immediately while the legal process plays out." I thought about Megan's smug smile, about Derek's silence, about the text message calling me a confused old woman. "When can we start the paperwork?" Harold pulled out a pen. "Right now, if you're ready." I took the pen. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt anticipation. I felt power. They thought I was too old to fight. They were about to find out what 40 years of teaching difficult children had taught me about patience. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. And if you've ever dealt with family members who underestimated you, who thought you were too old, too kind, or too quiet to stand up for yourself, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Now let's see what happens when the sirens start. The next week moved with quiet precision. Harold filed the donation paperwork with Dare County. Every document was reviewed twice, every signature notarized, every legal requirement satisfied. There would be no loopholes for Megan to exploit. Marcus scheduled the training exercise for Saturday morning, 6:00 a.m., early enough that the occupants would certainly be asleep, late enough that neighbors would be awake to witness. "We'll have 4 trucks," Marcus told me during our final planning call. "Full crew. The local news usually covers our training exercises. Good PR for the department. I've made sure they know about this one." "News coverage? Is that a problem?" I thought about Megan's smug face, about the family Zoom call where she'd painted me as a confused old woman. "No," I said, "that's not a problem at all." I called Eleanor the night before. "I need a favor," I said. "Can you be outside tomorrow morning around 6 with your phone?" Eleanor didn't ask why. She'd known me long enough to trust me. "I'll bring coffee," she said, "and my reading glasses. I want to see every detail." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Robert's chair, looking at his photograph. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I told him. "I'm doing it because you taught me that what's ours is worth protecting. You built that house for us, for our family, and I won't let anyone take it." The photograph didn't answer, but I could have sworn Robert was smiling. At 4:00 a.m., I got in my car and drove toward the Outer Banks. By 5:30, I was parked 1 block away from my own house, Eleanor beside me with a thermos of coffee. "Ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for weeks." My phone rang at 5:45 a.m. "Derek." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Eleanor watched me silently. "I should take this," I said. "You don't have to." "I know," I answered. "Mom." Derek's voice was strained, urgent. "I heard something. Someone told Megan you've been talking to lawyers, that you're planning something with the house. Where did you hear that?" "It doesn't matter. Mom, please, whatever you're doing, stop. Just stop. We can work this out as a family." "A family?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Derek, you stood in my house, and watched your wife tell me I had no rights to my own property. You said nothing." I know, and I'm sorry, but you let her call me senile in front of our entire family. You let her parents sleep in your father's bed, wear his clothes, and you said nothing." Silence on the line. "Mom, Megan says you're confused. She says you're making up stories about break-ins and crowbars. She says—" "I have video, Derek. Your wife broke into my house with a crowbar. I have it on camera." More silence. Longer this time. That's not possible. Megan said you gave them a key." "Megan lied. She's been lying to you from the beginning, and if you'd bothered to ask me, your mother, you would have known that." I heard him breathing, processing. "Mom, please, whatever you're planning, don't do it. Megan will be furious. She'll—" "Derek," I cut him off. "I love you. I will always love you, but I will not let anyone, including you, take what your father left me. If you want to be part of my life after today, you know where to find me." I hung up. Eleanor reached over and squeezed my hand. In the distance, I heard sirens. The sirens grew louder. Eleanor and I sat in my car, watching the street slowly come to life. Porch lights flickered on. Curtains twitched. The neighborhood was waking up to something unusual. "Patty," Eleanor's voice was soft, "are you sure about this?" I looked at the house I'd shared with Robert for 40 years. The house where we'd celebrated Derek's first steps, his graduation, his wedding. The house where I'd scattered my husband's ashes in the garden he loved. "Robert told me something before he died," I said. "He made me promise. He said, 'Patty, don't let anyone take what we built, not even Derek. What's ours is ours.' He was a wise man. He knew me better than anyone. He knew I'd want to forgive, to make peace, to let things go." I watched the first fire truck turn onto our street. But some things shouldn't be let go. Some things are worth fighting for. The trucks were closer now. 4 of them, just as Marcus had promised. Red and white, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the quiet morning. Neighbors were stepping onto their porches. A news van pulled up at the end of the street. And there, in my driveway, the lights inside my house were starting to turn on. They were waking up. They had no idea what was coming. "Here we go," Eleanor said. I opened my car door and stepped out into the dawn. The fire truck surrounded the house like a military operation. Firefighters in full gear jumped from the vehicles, moving with practiced efficiency. They set up barriers, unrolled hoses, positioned equipment. To anyone watching, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like, a serious training exercise. Marcus Smith stepped out of the lead truck, clipboard in hand, uniform immaculate. He caught my eye across the street and gave me the slightest nod. Then he walked to my front door and knocked. Not a polite knock, a fire marshal knock, the kind that shakes the frame. "Fire department! Everyone inside must evacuate immediately. This structure has been acquired for training exercises." Silence. Then chaos. I heard shouting inside, footsteps pounding. Something crashed. A lamp, maybe, or a chair. The door flew open. Gary Porter stood there in his bathrobe, Robert's bathrobe, face puffy with sleep and confusion. "What the hell is going on? There's no fire." "Sir, this property has been legally transferred to the Dare County Fire Department." Marcus's voice was calm, professional, utterly implacable. "You have 5 minutes to collect personal belongings and vacate the premises." "Transferred? That's impossible. We live here." "Not anymore." Marcus held up a document. "This is the deed of donation, signed by the legal owner, Patricia Vaughn. As of 48 hours ago, this structure belongs to the fire department. You are trespassing on government property." "This is insane!" Linda Porter appeared behind her husband, hair wild, clutching a robe closed. "You can't just throw us out. We have rights." "You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The news camera was rolling. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, phones raised, recording everything. Eleanor stood among them, capturing every moment. And then Megan appeared. She pushed past her parents, still in her pajamas, mascara smeared, face contorted with fury. Her eyes scanned the crowd frantically until they found me, standing on the sidewalk, watching. "You!" She pointed at me, voice rising to a shriek. "You did this, you crazy old—" "Ma'am." Marcus stepped between us, blocking her path. "I'm going to need you to step back and begin collecting your belongings. You now have 4 minutes." Megan's mouth opened and closed. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. Megan stormed toward me, but 2 firefighters blocked her path. "Get out of my way! That woman stole my house!" "Your house?" I stepped forward, close enough for her to hear me clearly. "Megan, your name has never been on that deed. It was my house when you broke into it with a crowbar. It was my house when you changed the locks. And it was my house when I chose to donate it. You can't do this. Squatters' rights don't apply to people who commit breaking and entering." Marcus held up his tablet, turning it so the gathered crowd could see. "We have video footage, Mrs. Vaughn, time-stamped, showing you and your father forcing entry into this property 5 weeks ago." The crowd murmured. Someone gasped. Megan's face went white. "That video is fake. She's lying. She's a confused old woman who—" "The video is stored on a cloud server with original metadata intact," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the yard. "It's already been submitted to the Dare County Sheriff's Office. You'll be receiving a summons for breaking and entering, trespassing, and property damage." "No!" Megan shook her head, backing away. "No, no, no! Derek! Derek!" But Derek wasn't there. Not yet. Gary and Linda Porter were escorted out by firefighters, each carrying a hastily packed bag. Linda was crying. Gary looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "This isn't over," Megan hissed at me. "I'll sue you. I'll take everything you have." "With what evidence?" I kept my voice calm. "I have the deed. I have the video. I have witnesses." I gestured to the crowd, the news camera, the firefighters. "What do you have, Megan?" She had nothing, and she knew it. Marcus stepped forward one final time. "Ma'am, your 5 minutes are up. Please exit the property now or you will be removed." Megan looked at me with pure hatred. Then she turned and walked to her car, still in her pajamas, still clutching nothing but her phone. As she passed, Marcus spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Mrs. Vaughn, Patricia Vaughn, was my 4th-grade teacher. She's the reason I became who I am today, and I will always protect the people who protected me." The crowd began to applaud. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt something crack open inside me. Something that had been frozen since the day I'd found strangers in my home. The applause was still fading when a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. "Derek!" He ran toward the house, face pale, eyes wild. He took in the fire trucks, the crowd, his in-laws being escorted away, his wife standing barefoot on the sidewalk. "Mom," He stopped in front of me, breathing hard. "What did you do?" "I protected what's mine, Derek, what your father left me." "But Megan said—" "Megan lied." Eleanor stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Here, watch." She played the video, the one showing Megan with a crowbar, the one showing Gary helping her break down the door, the one showing Derek arriving an hour later, walking into a house with a freshly replaced lock like nothing had happened. Derek watched in silence, watched in. When it ended, he looked at his wife. "You told me Mom gave you a key." Derek, it's not what it looks like. You told me she was confused, that she was making things up." His voice cracked. "You made me believe my own mother was losing her mind." "She's manipulating you. She's always hated me." "I never hated you, Megan." I spoke quietly, but everyone heard. "I tried to love you because my son loved you, but you stole from me. You lied to my son. You tried to turn my own family against me." I paused. "And you threw away my husband's flower pots, the ones he painted himself." Megan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Derek turned to me. His eyes were wet. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "I know, sweetheart." I touched his face, the way I had when he was small. "You made a mistake, but you're here now. That's what matters." He pulled me into a hug, the first real hug we'd shared in years. Behind us, Megan screamed something incoherent and got into her car. Tires squealed as she drove away. Derek didn't watch her go. He just held onto his mother. "We're almost at the end, but before we get there, if this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. A mother who's been taken for granted, a grandmother who's been pushed aside, anyone who's ever been told they're too old to stand up for themselves. Sometimes the quietest people have the loudest victories. Now let's see how this all ends." The sheriff's deputies arrived within the hour. By then, the fire trucks had departed, the news crew had packed up, and most of the neighbors had drifted back to their Saturday morning routines. But the legal machinery was just getting started. Deputy Martinez took my statement first, then Eleanor's. The video was transferred to official evidence files. Timestamps were verified. The chain of custody was documented with the precision of people who'd done this many times before. "Mrs. Vaughn," Deputy Martinez said, closing his notebook, "based on what we have here, we'll be pursuing charges against Megan Porter Vaughn, Gary Porter, and Linda Porter. Breaking and entering is a Class 1 misdemeanor in North Carolina. Given the video evidence, I don't anticipate any difficulty with prosecution." "What happens now?" "They'll receive summons to appear in court. If convicted, they're looking at potential jail time, usually suspended for first offenses, plus fines and restitution for any property damage." He paused. "I should mention, your daughter-in-law was not cooperative when we contacted her. She made some colorful accusations about you." "I can imagine. None of them will affect the case. The evidence is clear." He handed me his card. "If you experience any harassment or intimidation, call me directly." Derek stayed with me that day. We walked through the house together, cataloging what had been moved, what had been damaged, what was missing. Robert's reading chair was in the garage, shoved behind boxes. His bathrobe had been thrown in the trash. "I'll buy you a new one," Derek said, his voice thick. "I don't want a new one. I wanted the one that smelled like your father." I touched his arm. "But I'd rather have my son back. That matters more." He broke down then, crying the way he hadn't cried since he was a child. I held him and let him grieve. For his marriage, for his mistakes, for the years he'd lost to a woman who had never loved anyone but herself. 1 week later, I signed the papers that brought my house home. Harold's office felt different this time, lighter somehow. The heavy dread that had followed me for weeks had lifted. In its place was something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. "This is the transfer document," Harold explained, sliding a single page across his desk. "The Dare County Fire Department releases all claim to the property in exchange for $1 and your written gratitude for their service." $1? $1. He smiled. "Cheapest real estate transaction I've ever handled." I wrote the check, $1 made out to the Dare County Fire Department, and signed my name on the transfer document. Just like that, the beach house was mine again. Marcus had come to witness the signing. He stood by the window in his civilian clothes, looking almost shy. "Mrs. Vaughn, I want you to know, everything we did was by the book. The training exercise was legitimate. My crew actually learned a lot about rapid evacuation procedures." "I'm sure they did." I stood and crossed to him. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you." "You already did. 30 years ago." He took my hands in his. "You told a scared little boy that he mattered, that he could be something. I never forgot. Your father leaving wasn't your fault. I just wanted you to know that." "I know, because you told me. Every day until I believed it." We stood there for a moment, teacher and student, connected across 3 decades by kindness that had never been forgotten. "Mr. Vaughn would be proud of you," Marcus said finally. "And he'd be proud of you too, Mrs. Vaughn. You fought for what was yours." "I learned from the best," I said. "Both of you." Derek came to see me in Raleigh a month after the showdown. He looked different, thinner, tired, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a clarity that comes from seeing the truth, even when it hurts. "I filed for divorce," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Last week." "I know," Harold had told me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure." He stared at his coffee cup. "I keep thinking about all the things she said, about you, about Dad, about the house. I believed her, Mom, every time. Even when something felt wrong, I told myself she must be right because she was my wife. She was very convincing." "She was a liar." The word came out hard, bitter. "She lied about the key. She lied about you being confused. She lied about everything." He looked up at me. "I started therapy. The therapist says I have trouble with boundaries, with standing up for myself, with recognizing manipulation." "That sounds like hard work." "It is, but I need to understand why I let this happen, why I chose her over you." His voice broke. "You're my mother. You raised me. You loved me my whole life, and I threw that away for someone who was using me." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Derek, I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. Watching you stand there while she laughed at me, that was one of the worst moments of my life." I squeezed his fingers. "But you're here now. You're trying to understand. You're trying to change. That's all I ever wanted." "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not yet, but I'm not asking you to earn it overnight. I'm asking you to keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep being the son I raised you to be." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I will, Mom. I promise." "Then that's enough. For now. That's enough." The court date came 2 months later. I didn't attend. I didn't need to watch Megan face the consequences of her choices. I'd already seen enough of her, enough to last a lifetime. Harold called me with the results. "She took a plea deal," he said, "pled guilty to breaking and entering and property damage in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutor agreed. It saved everyone a trial." "What's the sentence?" 18 months probation, $3,000 in fines, 200 hours of community service." He paused. "And a restraining order. She's prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you or the beach house for 5 years." "What about her parents?" "Gary and Linda pled guilty to trespassing. Smaller fines, $1,500 each. They've already paid and returned to their apartment in Raleigh." Another pause. "Linda tried to call you, by the way. Left a message with my office." "What did she say?" "That they didn't know what Megan was planning, that they thought you'd given permission. She wanted to apologize." I thought about Linda's face that morning. The confusion, the fear, the tears. Part of me believed she hadn't known the full truth, but another part remembered her drinking coffee in my kitchen, sleeping in my guest room, never once picking up the phone to ask me directly. "Tell her I accept her apology," I said finally, "but I don't want further contact." "Understood. And Megan?" "She's moved back to Virginia, living with a cousin, I'm told. The divorce will be finalized next month. Derek isn't contesting anything. He just wants it over." I sat with that information for a long moment. "Harold, do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, Patty, no. People like Megan don't see themselves as wrong. They see themselves as victims of other people's unfairness. She'll spend the rest of her life believing you stole something from her. Then I feel sorry for her. You're a better person than most, Patty. No, I'm just tired of carrying anger. It's too heavy for a woman my age. The following week, I sat in Harold's office again. This time, we weren't fighting for my property. We were protecting it for the future. I want to update my will, I told him. Everything needs to be clear. No ambiguity, no loopholes. Harold nodded, pulling out a fresh legal pad. Tell me what you're thinking. First, Megan is to receive nothing. Not 1 cent, not one item, not one memory. If Derek ever remarries her or allows her access to any property I leave him, his inheritance is forfeit. That's enforceable. What else? Derek remains my primary beneficiary, but with conditions. He has to complete 1 year of therapy before he receives full control of any assets. Until then, you manage everything as trustee. Harold raised an eyebrow. That's unusual, but not unreasonable. He agreed to this? He suggested it. He said he doesn't trust his own judgment yet. I smiled sadly. At least he's learning. Anything else? The beach house. I took a breath. After I'm gone, I want it donated to the Dare County Fire Department, permanently this time. They can use it for training, for retreats, for whatever they need. I want Marcus and his crew to have a place by the ocean. Harold set down his pen. Patty, that house is worth nearly $500,000. I know, and I can't think of a better use for it. I looked out the window toward the horizon I couldn't see, but could always feel. Robert built that house for family. Marcus's crew, their family now, the kind that shows up when you need them. Harold smiled. Robert would approve. I know he would. I picked up the pen. Now where do I sign? Gary and Linda Porter returned to their small apartment in Raleigh, but they didn't return to their old lives. Word travels fast in tight-knit communities. By the time they unpacked their bags, the neighbors already knew. The church friends already whispered. The people they'd bragged to about their beach house lifestyle had already seen the news footage of them being escorted out in bathrobes. I heard updates through the grapevine, through Harold, through mutual acquaintances, through the strange way small towns keep track of everyone's business. Gary stopped going to his weekly poker game. Linda stopped attending her book club. They'd become cautionary tales, examples of what happens when you let your children's schemes become your own. Linda called me once, about 3 months after the trial. Patricia, her voice was thin, reedy. I just wanted to say, we didn't know. Megan told us you'd agreed. She said the house was going to be Derek's anyway, and you wanted us to enjoy it while— Linda. I cut her off gently. You lived in my house for 2 months. You never once called me to say thank you. You never once asked if I was okay with the arrangement. You knew something was wrong, and you chose not to ask questions. Silence on the line. I accept your apology, I continued. I believe you didn't know everything, but I don't want a relationship with you. Please don't call again. I hung up before she could respond. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned, and that's okay. Spring came slowly that year, but when it arrived, it was glorious. I drove down to the Outer Banks on a Thursday morning, windows open, the same oldies station playing the same songs Robert and I used to love. The highway unspooled before me like a promise. The house looked different when I pulled into the driveway, not because anything had changed structurally. Harold had arranged for repairs, new locks, fresh paint on the trim, but because I saw it differently now. It wasn't just Robert's dream house anymore. It was proof that I could fight for what mattered, that I could win. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, opening windows, letting the salt air wash away the last traces of strangers. In the living room, Robert's reading chair sat exactly where it had always been. Derek had found it in the garage and restored it to its rightful place. The garden needed work. The flower pots Robert had painted were gone forever, but the roses he'd planted 20 years ago were blooming anyway, life persisting despite everything. Eleanor appeared on her porch as I stepped outside. "Welcome home, Patty." I walked over, and she handed me a glass of sweet tea without being asked. We sat on her porch the way we'd sat 100 times before, watching the ocean, saying nothing that needed to be said. "You did good," Eleanor said finally. "Robert would be proud." "I hope so. I know so." She clinked her glass against mine. "To stubborn old women who don't give up." "To stubborn old women," I agreed. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I was home. A year passed. Derek's divorce was finalized in the spring. He sold the apartment he'd shared with Megan and moved into a smaller place closer to his office. Simpler, quieter, his. He came to visit me at the beach house on a Saturday in June, the first time he'd been back since the morning of the fire trucks. "I wasn't sure I could come here," he admitted, standing on the porch, "after everything that happened." "This is your home too, Derek. It always was." We walked on the beach that afternoon, shoes in hand, waves lapping at our feet. The same beach where he'd learned to swim, built sandcastles, chased seagulls as a little boy. "Therapy's going well," he said. "I'm starting to understand why I let Megan control everything, why I was so afraid to disagree with her. And it goes back further than her. Dad was strong, certain. I never felt like I measured up. So when Megan came along and told me what to think, what to do, it felt familiar, safe, in a twisted way. Your father loved you, Derek. He just didn't always know how to show it." "I know. I'm working on that too." He stopped walking, turned to face me. "Mom, I want to promise you something." "What's that?" "I will never let anyone treat you the way she did. Ever again. And I will never stand by and do nothing when someone I love is being hurt." I took his face in my hands, the way I had when he was small. "That's all I ever wanted, sweetheart. Not perfection, just presence, just you, showing up." He hugged me then, there on the beach, with the waves and the wind and 40 years of memories swirling around us. My son had come home. I hosted a dinner that summer. Nothing fancy, just grilled fish, fresh vegetables from the farmer's market, and a peach cobbler I'd made from my mother's recipe. But the guest list was everything. Marcus came in civilian clothes, looking almost shy without his uniform. Harold brought a bottle of wine older than Derek. Eleanor arrived with extra dessert because she never trusted anyone else's baking. We sat on the porch as the sun went down, talking and laughing like old friends, because that's what we were now. Not just allies who'd fought a battle together, but people who genuinely cared about each other. After dinner, I gave Marcus a gift. It was a framed photograph, his 4th grade class picture, the one I'd kept in my files for 30 years. I'd written on the back, "To Marcus, who proved that kindness always comes back. With love, Mrs. Vaughn." He stared at it for a long moment, blinking hard. "You kept this?" "I kept photos of all my students, but yours was always special." I touched his arm. "You were so scared that year, so sure you weren't worth anything because your father left. And look at you now. Because of you. Because of you. I just reminded you what was already there." He hugged me then, this tall, strong man who'd once been a frightened little boy. "Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn, for everything." "Thank you, Marcus, for showing up when I needed you most. Some debts can never be repaid, they can only be honored." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat at Robert's desk and opened my journal. I'd started writing after he died, just a way to process grief, to feel like I was still talking to him. But lately, the entries had changed, less about loss, more about what I'd learned. I picked up my pen and wrote, "Today, I realized something important. For 68 years, I thought being kind meant saying yes, meant forgiving quickly, meant giving people the benefit of the doubt even when they hadn't earned it. I was wrong. Kindness isn't weakness, but kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. It invites people to take and take until there's nothing left." Megan saw my kindness and thought it was something to exploit. She saw my patience and mistook it for passivity. She saw my age and assumed it meant I was helpless. She was wrong about all of it. I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That saying no is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. That the people who truly care about you will respect your limits, and the people who don't, well, they've shown you who they are. Robert used to say I was too trusting. Maybe he was right. But I'd rather be someone who trusts too much than someone who trusts no one at all. The key is knowing when to stop, when to say enough, when to fight back. I fought back, and I won. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, but because what Robert and I built together was worth protecting. Because I was worth protecting. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know this. I will spend them on my terms, in my house, with the people who love me. And anyone who tries to take that from me will learn what Megan learned. This old woman has teeth. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the moonlit ocean. "Good night, Robert," I whispered. I kept my promise. The morning came soft and golden. I woke before dawn, the way I always did now, and made my way to the kitchen. Coffee first, the same brand Robert and I had drunk for 40 years. Then out to the porch, to the chair that faced the ocean. The beach was empty. The waves whispered their endless conversation with the shore. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and fell silent. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "Beautiful morning here in Raleigh, thinking of you. Love you, Mom." I smiled and typed back, "Love you too. Come visit this weekend? I'll make your father's famous pancakes." "Wouldn't miss it." I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. A fire truck drove past on the coastal road, probably heading to a training exercise somewhere. I raised my hand in a wave, not knowing if anyone could see me, not caring if they couldn't. Marcus was out there somewhere, doing his job, protecting people the way he'd protected me. Eleanor was probably awake next door, reading her morning paper, ready to wave when I walked past. Harold was in his office, keeping my affairs in order, honoring his friendship with Robert. And I was here, in my house, drinking my coffee, watching my ocean. They thought I was too old to fight, too kind to push back, too weak to win. They were wrong about all of it. And now I drink my coffee in peace, in my house, watching the sunrise over my ocean. Some lessons are learned the hard way. Megan learned hers. And I learned that the quietest people often have the loudest victories. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or taken for granted, I hope you remember this. You are never too old, too kind, or too quiet to stand up for yourself. Please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, set your boundaries. Protect your peace. You deserve it.